There was a time when I had dreams, back before the cold weight of reality descended upon me and stripped away all hope. I don't know why I wrote such a depressing opening to this video. Today we're talking about dreams, those things your brain conjures up because you're asleep or have a triple-digit fever or you mixed the wrong kind of medications together. Really what today is about is any scene in a story that doesn't actually happen. Whether it's a dream, hallucination, or some kind of vision, these scenes bring with them a lot of potential, both positive and negative. While dreams are useful for temporarily breaking the logic of your story and perhaps exploring a setting or having events happen that wouldn't fit with the rest of the story, special consideration still needs to be given to how you weave these scenes into your story. The fact that dreams also don't have consequences means that the reader might spend a lot of time reading about events that don't actually impact the story. Add to that the simple potential to just confuse your reader, and you can see how writing dream sequences or other imagined scenes can get tricky very quickly. So with that, here are some tips for writing dream sequences. And as I mentioned before, this advice applies to visions or delusions or any other type of imagined scene that a character finds themselves in. Although isn't any scene in fiction technically imagined? Tip number 1, consider the purpose of the dream. Perhaps the starkest difference between fictional dreams and real-world dreams is that dreams in fiction generally need to have a purpose in the story. A dream might reveal a character's deepest fears or allow them to come to some sort of realization. It might allow them to relive some kind of traumatic event from their past, although with that you probably are getting more into the realm of a flashback. A dream might foreshadow important events later on in the story. In more fantastical settings, a dream might serve as a guiding sort of vision directed by some magical being. Whatever the dream is, you need to make sure it has a purpose, even if that purpose is to elaborate on the inner workings of a character or even just set the logical tone of the story. Just like with flashbacks, dreams take the reader out of the main story that they become invested in and forces them to read about some other set of events. Having a clear purpose of the dream will help make it clear to the reader why you are pulling them away from the story for this dream sequence. Speaking of getting away from the story, tip number 2, decide on the transition into the dream and make the reader aware that it is in fact a dream. Whether the character dozes off before slipping into the dream or snorts ancient bath salts before being thrust into a vision, you need to make the transition clear to the reader. They need to know that we're leaving reality and going into some kind of a dream. How you do this likely depends on the nature of the dream. Obviously, if it's triggered by some external agent, then after the character interacts with that external agent, they will slip into the dream. For more vanilla type sleep-induced dreams, you can either show the character falling asleep and then waking up in a dream, or potentially just cut to the dream. In the latter case, it's important to properly signpost that the character is in fact dreaming. There are several ways to do this. Showing that something follows dream logic and having the character notice that is one way. You can also lean a bit into dramatic irony here by having something strange happen that the character maybe doesn't notice, but the reader does. You need to be careful with this, as ultimately you want to ensure that the reader knows the character is dreaming, but in a lot of cases this might lead to a more realistic dream sequence because oftentimes when you're dreaming you don't necessarily realize that you are dreaming. Brings me to my next point, you also have to consider whether the character knows that they are dreaming or not. This is going to impact not only how the character behaves in the dream, but also how easy it is to inform the reader that this is in fact a dream. And of course, once the dream or vision or whatever it is over, you need to transition back to reality. This is, I think, generally fairly simple, as you just need the character to wake up or otherwise get jolted out of their vision. So it's quite a bit simpler than actually getting into the dream. Although if you do it improperly, it will still have negative consequences for the story. Speaking of consequences, Tip number 3, consider the consequences and after effects of the dream. In more realistic dream sequences, a dream will not generally have much in the way of physical effects in the real world. The character might come to some kind of realization or be scared by the events of the dream, but if they lose a hand in the dream, they probably won't wake up that way. Now, in more fantastical cases, there can be physical ramifications of a dream or vision, either involving just the character who is dreaming or perhaps other characters in the world. And if you are employing any of those mechanisms, you need to determine what those effects are. This gets back to the purpose of the dream. If we're distracting from the main story to show the dream, then there should be lasting consequences of it. Again, those consequences don't need to be physical or even anything that changes things in the main story, but the character should come to some kind of realization or become aware of a certain event or relive some kind of trauma that has lasting impacts and changes their behavior throughout the rest of the story. Just like with flashbacks, any dream that doesn't ultimately have consequences that affect the main story can and likely should be cut because it's not really serving a purpose at that point. Even dreams that only serve to reveal something about a character or set the tone of a story will change how the reader feels about those things for the rest of the story. So I guess a dream doesn't necessarily have to have an effect on the story if it has an effect on the reader, but it should at least affect one of those things. Just like I hope this video affected you by entertaining you for a few minutes, I guess. I need to come up with conclusions beforehand. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.